Behind the horrors of the Second World War were atrocities, brutal and inhumane, targeted towards captured girls by Hitler's most feared secret police. The Gestapo moved like shadows, hunting anyone who dares resist. Among their targets were young girls whose bravery makes them enemies of the Reich. These girls, some barely teenagers, faced horrors most can't imagine. The Gestapo was born on April 26, 1933, when Hermann Göring, one of Hitler's top men, created it in Berlin to crush any opposition to Nazi rule. Later, Heinrich Himmler took charge, turning it into a machine of terror that spread across Europe. Its mission was simple: silence dissent, enforce Nazi laws, and destroy anyone who stood in the way. For girls caught in their net, the Gestapo's methods were especially cruel, targeting not just their bodies but their spirits, aiming to break their will to fight. What tortures did these young women endure in the Gestapo's secret chambers? How did some find the strength to survive? These questions pull us into a story of pain, resilience, and defiance. From freezing cells to brutal interrogations, the Gestapo's tactics were designed to shatter hope, but the girls' courage often shone brighter. In this video, we'll dive into tortures the Gestapo used on captured girls. But to understand the nightmare these girls faced, we need to step back to 1933. In Berlin, at Prince Albrechtstrasse 8, the Gestapo set up its headquarters, a place that would become a symbol of terror. Under Göring, then Himmler, and Reinhard Heydrich, it grew into a vast network, with 150,000 informants by 1939, watching every corner of German life. Its goal was to stamp out resistance, enforce Nazi racial laws, and target Jews, communists, and anyone who dared speak out. When World War II erupted on September 1st, 1939, with Germany's invasion of Poland, the Gestapo's reach exploded. They followed Nazi armies into France, Norway, Poland, Czechoslovakia, and beyond, setting up torture centers in every occupied land. Places like Fort Breendonk in Belgium and Avenue Foch, 84 in Paris, became houses of horror. The Gestapo didn't just arrest enemies, they made them disappear, using tactics like the 1941 Night and Fog Decree to erase people without a trace. The war brought chaos to Europe, and Jews faced the worst of it. Laws like the Nuremberg Laws stripped them of rights, forced them to wear yellow stars, and herded them into ghettos like Warsaw and Theresienstadt. Girls, often caught for helping the resistance or just being related to fighters, became easy targets. Their youth didn't spare them. In fact, it made them vulnerable to the Gestapo's twisted methods, designed to exploit their fears and dreams. In occupied countries, the Gestapo ruled through fear. In Warsaw, their headquarters on Schucha Avenue echoed with screams. In Prague, the Petchek Palace became a torture hub. These places were built to break spirits, with cells so small you couldn't lie down, and walls that trapped every cry. The Gestapo's informants, neighbors, even family, made trust impossible, creating a world where no one felt safe. Yet, for the girls dragged into these torture chambers, the real terror was just beginning. Their stories, from the streets of Prague to the cells of Paris, show us not just the cruelty of the Gestapo, but the unbreakable will of those who faced it. Let's step inside those walls, but be warned, the horrors these girls endured were beyond imagination. The Gestapo's torture chambers were like something out of a nightmare. Girls as young as 13 were beaten with rubber clubs or whips made of animal tendons, striking places like the soles of their feet where pain was sharpest. These blows left no scars, but caused agony that lingered for days. In Poland and Riga, torturers went further, breaking toes or crushing limbs, making every step a torment. The goal wasn't just to hurt, it was to crush their fight. Electric shocks were another favorite. At Avenue Foch in Paris, girls were strapped to chairs while wires sent jolts through their fingers or worse. The shocks burned skin and twisted muscles, leaving them shaking. Jacques Delarue, a resistance fighter, described it as feeling like his body was ripping apart. For girls, this wasn't just pain, it was a violation, meant to make them feel helpless against their captors. Water was turned into a weapon too. In Norway's Kristiansand, called the House of Horror, girls were dunked in freezing water until they could barely breathe. Others faced waterboarding, a torture that made them feel like they were drowning over and over. Jean Amory, a survivor from Belgium's Fort Breendonk, said each second felt like dying and being born again, a cycle of terror that broke many. The Gestapo also attacked girls' looks to destroy their confidence. Faces were cut, noses or ears partly sliced, and hair torn out in clumps. These scars weren't just physical, they hit deep, knowing society judged women by appearance. Legs were targeted too, with deep cuts or broken bones, so walking became a daily reminder of their suffering. This was cruelty with a purpose, to make girls feel less human. Cells made things worse. worse. Up to 20 girls were crammed into spaces meant for 5, with no clean water, lice crawling everywhere, and dirt that caused infections. At Berlin's Prince Albrechtstrasse, cells had sloping floors or strange patterns on walls to mess with their minds. Some were kept so cold and damp that illness was certain. These conditions weren't accidents, they were part of the torture. Odette Sansom, a British spy caught in 1943, lived this horror. At Frayne Prison, her toenails were ripped out, and she faced fake executions, yet she never gave up her secrets. She later said the pain was bad, but the mental strain of staying strong was worse. Odette's story shows the Gestapo's brutality and the courage it couldn't break. But physical pain was only half the story. The Gestapo knew physical pain wasn't enough. They wanted to shatter girls' minds. In Norway's House of Horror, they forced girls to watch their husbands or children being hurt, knowing the guilt would crush them. Some saw loved ones killed right in front of them, a memory that haunted forever. This wasn't just torture, it was a twisted game to break their will to resist. Isolation was another weapon. Girls were locked in dark, silent cells, like the bunker at Fort Breendonk, for weeks. No sound, no light, just their own thoughts. This loneliness made them question reality, driving some to despair. In Hamburg's KZ Fuhlsbüttel prison, torturers played loud noises, then plunged cells into eerie quiet, confusing and exhausting prisoners until they couldn't think straight. Mock executions were pure terror. In Prague's Petchek Palace, girls were blindfolded, lined up, and heard guns click, only to realize the shots were fake. The fear of death lingered, making every moment a nightmare. Milada Horakova, a Czech resistor, said each day felt like her last, yet the real torture was never knowing when it would end. The Gestapo played cruel mind games too. Interrogators like Klaus Barbie and Leon promised freedom or safety for families, only to betray those hopes. Girls were left feeling foolish and broken, their trust shattered. In Warsaw, torturers left a loaded gun in the room, tempting girls to end their pain, a sick trick to push them over the edge. Humiliation was constant. Girls were stripped and forced to walk past laughing guards, as in Riga's dungeons. In Poland, ice showers meant standing naked in freezing water for hours, not for cleaning, but for shame. In fact, pregnant girls faced worse. They were beaten even during labor and their deepest instincts attacked. These acts stole their dignity, making them feel less than human. Simone Lagrange, only 13 when arrested in 1944, faced this cruelty. Klaus Barbie beat her, hung her by her wrists, and made her watch her father's execution. Yet she stayed silent, refusing to betray her friends. She later called it a battle between her and Barbie, one she won by surviving. Her story shows the Gestapo's evil, but also the strength of a young girl's spirit. But that's not all. The Gestapo's cruelty took a darker turn with sexual violence, a weapon used to break girls' spirits. In places like Norway's House of Horror or Czechoslovakian prisons, young girls were assaulted before being thrown into cells. These acts weren't just about physical harm, they were meant to shame and destroy dignity. For many, the pain of violation lingered long after the war, a scar hidden by silence due to the stigma of speaking out. Worse still, some girls endured these horrors in front of their families. In Riga's dungeons, mothers or husbands were forced to watch, amplifying the trauma. The Gestapo knew this would crush a girl's will, making her feel powerless. Pregnant girls faced even more brutality, kicked or beaten during labor, sometimes losing their babies. These attacks targeted their deepest instincts, turning motherhood into a source of agony. Public humiliation was another tactic. In Latvia, girls were stripped and forced to dance for guards who mocked them. These moments stripped away pride, reinforcing the Nazi goal of dehumanizing their victims. Every laugh from a guard was a blow to a girl's sense of self, designed to make her feel like nothing. The Gestapo didn't just want confessions, they wanted to erase hope. Lisa Lehrer, a French resistance fighter, faced this nightmare in 1944. Caught by Klaus Barbie and Lion, she was beaten, hung by her wrists, and humiliated in ways that broke her body, but not her spirit. For 9 days, she endured, never betraying her comrades. At Barbie's 1987 trial, she said, "I felt I was dying, but I was determined not to speak." Her courage was a quiet victory over cruelty. In Norway, the public was so outraged by these atrocities that torturers faced rare death penalties in 1947. Survivors like Lisa Elisa, carried their trauma in silence for years, but their testimonies later exposed the truth. These stories aren't just about pain, they're about girls who held on to their strength. Yet, the Gestapo's cruelty didn't stop with the living. It reached even the most vulnerable. Many girls who survived Gestapo interrogations were sent to camps like Ravensbrück, opened in 1939 just for women. Over 130,000 prisoners, including countless young girls, faced starvation, overcrowding, and disease. The camp was a factory of suffering, where survival meant enduring daily horrors. For girls, it wasn't just a prison, it was a place where hope was tested to its limits. Doctors at Ravensbrück turned girls into test subjects. Men like Dr. Karl Gebhardt infected wounds with germs or glass to study antibiotics, leaving girls with gangrene or death. Others faced amputations or bone experiments that left them crippled. These weren't medical procedures. They were torture disguised as science, robbing girls of their health and futures. Forced labor was relentless. Girls as young as 14 hauled rocks in quarries, built weapons in factories, or dug trenches under the eyes of brutal guards. Exhaustion and hunger were constant, and a single mistake could mean a beating or worse. By 1945, gas chambers were added, killing thousands, including many girls who had already endured years of suffering. Violette Sabo, a French resistance fighter, lived this horror. Captured in 1944, she was tortured at Paris's Avenue Foch with beatings and electric shocks before being sent to Ravensbrück. At just 23, she faced a firing squad in 1945, staring down her killers with defiance. Her bravery earned her the George Cross after the war, a symbol of her unbreakable spirit. Ravensbrück wasn't the end for all. Some girls survived, carrying scars that never faded. Their stories, from the camp's freezing barracks to its deadly experiments, show the Gestapo's reach into every corner of Nazi cruelty. But the terror wasn't just in their methods, it was also in the women who joined their ranks. Not all the Gestapo's allies were men. Women like Irma Grace, a guard at Auschwitz and Ravensbrück, became infamous for their cruelty. Known as the hyena of Auschwitz, Grace beat girls and tormented them with mind games, enjoying the power she held. Her actions shocked even those used to Nazi brutality, as she turned on her own gender with glee. Others, like Greta Hermann, worked as informers, betraying Jewish girls or resistance fighters for money or safety. These women handed over names, knowing it meant torture or death for their victims. Their betrayal cut deep. Girls expected solidarity from other women, making the sting of their actions feel like a personal wound. Some collaborated to survive, others because they believed in Nazi ideas or craved control. Whatever their reasons, their choices left a trail of pain. In the eyes of survivors, these women were gender traitors, their actions a twisted mockery of the sisterhood they should have shared. Irma Grace's trial in 1945 laid bare her horrors. Witnesses described her laughing as she whipped girls or set dogs on them. She was executed at 22, but many collaborators got lighter punishments, as courts often saw women as less guilty. This leniency angered survivors who knew the truth of their cruelty. Yet, amidst this betrayal, some girls shone as beacons of hope. In the darkest corners of Nazi terror, some girls shone like stars. Irina Sendler, a Polish social worker, risked everything to save 2,500 Jewish children from the Warsaw Ghetto. In 1943, the Gestapo caught her, beating her so badly her body ached for weeks. Yet, she never gave up a single name. Freed by a bribe, she took a new alias and kept fighting, later honored as righteous among the nations in 1965 for her courage. Evelina Landova was just 11 when she arrived at Theresienstadt Ghetto in 1942. A Jewish girl from Prague, she faced hunger and fear, but found hope in the Children's Heim, a place of secret learning and friendship. At 13, she was sent to Auschwitz, where survival seemed impossible. Yet, Evelina held on, later saying those moments of connection in the ghetto gave her strength to endure the horrors. Sophie Scholl, only 21, stood up to the Nazis with the White Rose Group in Munich. In 1943, she was arrested for spreading anti-Nazi leaflets. During interrogations, the Gestapo tried to break her, but she stood firm, saying, "What we wrote is believed by many, they just don't dare say it." Executed days later, her defiance inspired millions, proving one voice could echo through history. Eileen Nairn, a British spy, faced the Gestapo's wrath in 1944. Caught in France, she endured waterboarding that made her feel like she was drowning. The pain was unbearable, but she kept her secrets, protecting her resistance network. A bribe saved her life, and she continued her her work until the war ended, a quiet hero whose bravery spoke volumes. Hannie Schaft, a Dutch resistance fighter known as the Girl with the Red Hair, became a legend for her daring acts. At 22, she joined the Dutch underground, carrying messages and weapons past Nazi checkpoints. In 1944, the Gestapo caught her during a raid in Haarlem, beating her and trying to force out names of her comrades. Hannie stayed silent, her spirit unbroken despite the pain. Executed in 1945 at 24, she faced her death with courage, saying, "I'm a better shot than you," to her killers. Her story lives on in Holland, where she's honored every November. Denise Bloch, a French-Jewish SOE agent, risked everything to fight the Nazis. Parachuted into France in 1944, she sent vital radio messages to London, dodging Gestapo trackers. She was captured in June and was tortured at Ravensbrück with beatings and starvation, yet never betrayed her network. She was moved to Torgau labor camp, where she endured brutal factory work before being executed in 1945 at 29. Denise's bravery, recognized with the Croix de Guerre, showed the Gestapo that even in their darkest cells, a girl's resolve could shine brighter than their cruelty. Anita Lasker-Wallfisch, a German Jewish cellist, faced the Gestapo's wrath at 17. Arrested in 1942 for forging papers to escape Breslau, she was beaten and interrogated, but revealed nothing. Sent to Auschwitz, she played in the women's orchestra, using music to survive while witnessing horrors. Transferred to Bergen-Belsen, she endured starvation and disease. Liberated in 1945, Anita's defiance kept her alive. She later shared her story in speeches, like her 2018 Bundestag address, proving her strength outlasted the Gestapo's terror. These girls weren't just victims, they were warriors. Each faced the Gestapo's cruelty with a fire that refused to go out. Their stories show that even in the worst times, the human spirit can rise above pain. From Warsaw's ghetto to Munich's streets, they fought for hope, leaving a legacy that burns bright. But their courage wasn't the end of the story. The Gestapo's shadow lingered long after the war, and the fight for justice began. What became of those who survived and the memories they carried? Let's explore the legacy of these dark days. When the war ended in May 1945, the Gestapo's torture chambers stood empty, but their horrors lived on. The Nuremberg trials, starting in November 1945, called the Gestapo a criminal group, putting men like Ernst Kaltenbrunner on trial. He was executed in 1946, but others, like Gestapo chief Heinrich Himmler, vanished, leaving justice incomplete. The trial showed the world the truth of the Nazis' crimes, but not every torturer faced a judge. Klaus Barbie, the butcher of Lyon, escaped to Bolivia after the war, living free for decades. In 1987, France finally tried him, thanks to survivors like Simone Lagrange and Lisa Lehrer, who told of his cruelty. Their voices, shaking but strong, brought Barbie to justice, sentenced for crimes against humanity. These trials weren't just about punishment, they were about giving victims a chance to be heard. Places like Berlin's Prince Albrecht Strasse, once the Gestapo's heart, became memorials. Today, the Topography of Terror Museum draws over 1 million visitors a year, showing the cells where girls like Sophie Scholl were held. In Cologne, Elderhouse keeps prisoners scratched messages like, "I am innocent, long live France," as a reminder of their pain and hope. The Ravensbrück Memorial, opened in 1959 near Berlin, stands as a tribute to the girls and women who suffered in the camp. Once a place of torture and experiments, it now holds exhibitions with prisoners' letters and drawings, like those of Violette Sabo, showing their resilience. Over 200,000 visitors come yearly to walk the grounds where barracks once stood, ensuring the stories of girls like Denise Bloch aren't forgotten. It's a quiet promise to keep their courage alive, far from the Gestapo's reach. The International Holocaust Remembrance Day, held every January 27th, honors victims like Hannie and Anita. Started by the UN in 2005, it marks the liberation of Auschwitz, where many girls faced the Gestapo's horrors. Schools and communities worldwide read survivors' testimonies, like Lisa Lehrer's, and light candles for the lost. This day reminds us to fight hate today, so the pain of those brave girls who stood tall against the Nazis continues to teach and inspire. Their light burns on, a call to never forget. The USC Shoah Foundation has recorded 55,000 survivor stories, ensuring voices like Evelina Landova's aren't lost. These testimonies, started by Steven Spielberg after Schindler's List, teach the world about the Holocaust's cost. They're not just history, they're warnings about what hate can do, keeping the memory of these girls alive. Today, the rise of far-right groups, like Germany's AfD, worries people like Charlotte Knobloch, who says democracy is fragile. She reminds us the Gestapo grew from small steps of hate. We must stay watchful, as the past shows how fast things can slide. Elie Wiesel's words, "Bear witness," push us to keep learning and remembering. Simone Weil, a survivor who became a leading politician, said, "Nothing is more contagious than example." Her call to never forget drives museums, films, and books that honor these girls. Their courage lives on, a light in the darkness of history, urging us to hold tight to their stories and the lessons they teach. From the icy cells of Fort Breendonk to the gas chambers of Ravensbrück, these girls faced cruelty that's hard to imagine. Yet, Irina, Sophie, Evelina, and countless others were heroines who defied the Gestapo with every breath. Their stories of survival and resistance remind us that even in the darkest times, hope can endure, shining through the worst of human evil. We honor them by keeping their memories alive. Subscribe to our channel, share this video, and join us in making sure history's lessons never fade. As Elie Wiesel said, "For the dead and the living, we must bear witness." Thank you for walking with us through these shadows. Let's keep their light burning bright. Subscribe for more history videos.